Was it terrorism? Sorting through the evidence, looking for the cause of a Russian passenger plane crash in Egypt. Real-life horror film. Kermit Gosnell's grisly story comes to the big screen. Francis makes Forbes list. The Holy Father ranked as the world's fourth most powerful person. Who are the top three? And non-stop prayer. Nuns in La Crosse, Wisconsin pray night and day since 1878. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, November 5th, 2015. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. Egypt tries to do damage control amid increasing speculation. A Russian plane was brought down Saturday by a bomb. Mark Irons is at the White House tonight with a quick update on the international investigation. Mark?
Brian, ISIS is taking responsibility for Saturday's crash in Egypt, but hasn't provided any evidence to support that claim. Press Secretary Josh Earnest says the U.S. has not determined the cause of this crash, but the White House says nothing can be ruled out. Yesterday, the UK grounded all flights in and out of the Sinai Peninsula, citing concerns that a bomb took this flight down. Now, British officials confirm that flights to bring back British tourists from Sharm el-Sheikh will start on Friday. Egypt and Russia, meanwhile, insist that the investigation into this crash must run its course before any conclusion can be reached. Brian?
Mark Irons at the White House. Thank you, Mark. Meanwhile, a top U.S. diplomat defends President Obama's policy for fighting ISIS militants in Syria. She says Russia's intervention has destabilized the battlefield.
And Moscow has failed, as you said and as Assistant Secretary Patterson said, to exact any humanitarian concessions from the Assad regime as the price for Russian support. The regime continues to barrel bomb its own citizens with impunity, perhaps even emboldened by Moscow's help.
Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland says if Russia wants to play a positive role, it would insist that Syrian President Bashar Assad ground the aircraft used to bomb civilians. Her comments on Capitol Hill Wednesday come as the U.S. and its partners try to work towards a ceasefire in Syria. It's good to have Nina Shea, Director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute, with us. Nina, you served for 12 years on the U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom. That's an independent body that you served on. Can you tell us just how many Syrian Christian refugees have been admitted to the U.S.?
In 5 years of civil war, 53. Grand total of 53 Christians that we have admitted from Syria as refugees.
Why so few?
We rely, the U.S. State Department is in charge of this program. They rely on the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. They run refugee camps outside of Syria. The Christians are afraid to go to those camps, therefore, because they're persecuted in the camps. The women are raped. The men are forced to swear allegiance to the caliphate by militias that run through these camps. And so the Christians are afraid to go there to register as UN refugees.
So where do they go and how do they get lost then in this system?
Well, the Christians from Syria go to Lebanon or Jordan and they live in urban areas. They rent cheap apartments or churches or other aid groups rent for them cheap apartments in the slums of these cities.
So there are many nations that are now taking in Syrian refugees. Are they pretty much ignoring this Christian minority because they're going through strictly the UN system?
That's right. We're seeing only token amounts of Christians coming into this country, Canada, and the UK. And in Britain, the House of Lords has taken this issue up and started to fight back, started to point out that the Christians are being, because they're so persecuted, in fact, facing genocide, according to Pope Francis, they have left Syria, and that same fear and that same persecution and violence against them for their religion, for their Christian faith, is preventing them from registering. Is
there anything we can do personally and as a nation to make this more fair for these Christian refugees?
Absolutely. As a nation, we should be proactively going out and making sure they know about the UN process and get registered. That's very important. The United States takes more refugees from the UN than the whole rest of the world combined, more than half. We have a lot of leverage. Your viewers, all of us citizens, should be writing to our elected officials and demanding that there be fairness in this process. These are these non-Muslim minorities. It's not just Christians, it's also Yazidis, also Baha'is, the Zoroastrians. They are being slighted in our refugee process.
And it's also important that this presence remains in that region, right?
It is, but they cannot remain at this point. They will either be forcibly converted to Islam or slaughtered. And we have seen that over and over again. And there are 3 Christians that were just executed by ISIS in Syria. There are 200 more being held hostage by the same group from the same town, and they are threatened with execution as well.
Terrible plight. Nina Shea with the Hudson Institute, thank you for sharing your insight. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. The wife and 1 son of an Illinois police officer who apparently killed himself after embezzling money for years are now under investigation. Lieutenant Charles Glinowitz allegedly stole thousands of dollars from an Explorer post over the course of 7 years. His wife and 1 of their sons are now reportedly caught up in this probe. Authorities revealed the embezzlement investigation this week. They confirmed Glinowitz staged his suicide to look like he died in the line of duty. They say their probe points to criminal activity by at least 2 other people, but did not directly identify them. A boy who disappeared from his Alabama home when he was just 5 years old is finally found 13 years later. Authorities say he was living with his father in Ohio, but wasn't discovered until he applied for college. Julian Hernandez's mother reported him missing from the Birmingham area in 2002. Last week, a school counselor helping Hernandez with a college application realized that he was listed by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The teen had been living with his father on Cleveland's west side under an assumed name. The father, 53-year-old Bobby Hernandez, is now in custody. The chairman of the Congressional Prayer Caucus denounces a Seattle area school district suspension of a coach for praying at midfield after high school football games. Virginia Republican Randy Forbes says the district is violating Coach Joe Kennedy's religious rights. Kennedy was put on paid administrative leave for ignoring orders to stop overt religious displays on the field. Students will sometimes join Kennedy, but his lawyers insist that he is not leading them in prayer. He is just praying himself. Kennedy's lawyers say they plan to file a discrimination complaint, which could lead to a lawsuit. The gruesome world of late-term abortionist Kermit Gosnell hits the big screen. A new documentary, 3801 Lancaster, American Tragedy, opens in some cities on Tuesday. It features interviews with Gosnell and even his victims.
I went to him because as a child I was taught doctors were people that you could trust. You can't even trust them anymore.
We've allowed a man to butcher babies, butcher women, and nobody did a damn thing about it.
News Nightly's Jason Calvi watched the film, then spoke with writer-director David Altroga.
David, you spent about 5 years working on this project. In your documentary, you talk about all the cover-ups, and you talk about how the DA, the state, they didn't do anything. There were many, many times where they could have and they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the main reasons I wanted to make the film. It was tragic what Gosnell did, but to me what was almost more shocking was that he could have been stopped for over 20 years. And there were report after report of wrongdoing at his clinic, and the Pennsylvania Department of Health and State ignored all of those reports.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
Kermit Gosnell.
David, you interviewed Gosnell over the course of about 8 months. What was that experience like for you?
Gosnell is he's a very charming man. He's a very intelligent man. You know, he believes he's innocent. He believes that he's innocent of all wrongdoing. So trying to figure out, learn who he is and then why he thinks he's innocent. It took about 8 months of interviews to kind of get there.
Who is he after that 8 months?
I think everyone should watch the movie and come to their own conclusion, hear the interviews. My personal opinion is that he's a guy who bought into an ideology that allowed him to do these things.
So why should our audience watch this film, and how can they see it?
Yeah, well, they should watch the film because this case is so important and so relevant to the discussion that's happening in our country right now about abortion, whether you're pro-life, pro-choice. This case just asks a lot of the crucial questions about the abortion issue. And they can see it. There's screenings beginning on November 10th in cities across the country. If you go to the website, 3801lancaster.com, you can see if the movie's playing in your city, or you can sign up to host a screening in your city.
Very important film. Thank you so much, David, for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks, Jason. The trial of 46 politicians, businessmen, and go-betweens is now underway in Rome. They're accused of corruption using mafia methods to gain control of millions of dollars in city contracts. The investigation alleges the group received kickbacks and was taking bribes from several mayors. Today, lawyers mostly work through technicalities. They want their clients to be moved from faraway prisons to facilities closer to the hearings. That trial is expected to last for months. Forbes magazine names Pope Francis as the world's 4th most powerful person. The magazine cites the Holy Father's leadership on such issues as the environment, immigration, and the persecution of Christians. That list, by the way, includes heads of state, financiers, philanthropists, and entrepreneurs. The top 3 on the list: Russian President Vladimir Putin, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and U.S. President Barack Obama. Coming up, Catholic Charities in the thick of recovery from more floods in Texas. And small reminders of faith. The story behind the tiny saint's charms. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom should I fear? The Lord is my life's refuge. Of whom should I be afraid? The responsorial psalm from today's Mass. Thanks for joining us this Thursday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Parts of Texas continue to recover from drenching storms that hit the state almost 2 weeks ago, remnants of Hurricane Patricia. Thank God there wasn't the death or devastating floods experienced in the spring. More than a foot of rain, though, has fallen in some areas, closing busy highways, even derailing a train. Patricia roared ashore in Mexico October 23rd with winds of up to 200 miles per hour. It is the most powerful hurricane on record in the Western Hemisphere. Matt Johns is Director of Mission Integration Programs with Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. Matt, can you describe the efforts of Catholic Charities to address the most recent flooding in that area?
Sure thing, Brian. Most recently, we experienced flooding this past weekend, actually on Halloween. We had about 100 to 150 homes affected in the Archdiocese. In addition to the flooding that we experienced, there were a number of tornadoes. In fact, we had 6 tornadoes that came through. Catholic Charities has made an effort to go out and canvass the area, reach out to individuals who were affected, and seek to offer them case management primarily as a means of moving forward from this.
And this on top of that terrible storm about 5 months ago in the spring. 30 people died in that general geographic area, as well as just incredible devastation. What is the long-term recovery like, and what are you guys doing for that?
Well, the long-term recovery takes place right after the relief stage. So now that we're 5 months removed from that, we're well into the recovery phase. Eventually, these individuals who are most in need, who don't have insurance, who don't have other means to pay for the different needs that they have around their home, whether it be structural or maybe it's spiritual, whatever these needs are, we get together with other organizations locally here in Houston, the greater Houston area, to meet those needs, utilizing all of our different gifts, talents, skills, and resources, primarily through a long-term recovery group that we've put together here called the Greater Houston Storm Recovery Network.
Matt, from your perspective with Catholic Charities, do you get the sense that disasters like this bring people, especially people of faith, together who really want to help?
Absolutely. We have a tremendous response in our recovery network that involves different Methodists, the Baptists, the Muslims, the Jewish faith. There are just tremendous groups all coming together under this one banner of serving our brothers and sisters in need.
Matt Johns with Catholic Charities in the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. Thanks so much for joining us on EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Brian.
And the Vatican introduces a new website to help provide medical care for children and families around the world. Today, the Santa Marta Pediatric Clinic unveiled that site. The group has been around for more than 100 years, serving children and families. Now it's using the internet to register families and spread the word about the organization. The clinic is run by the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. Well, throughout November, beginning with All Saints Day, we remember and pray for our departed brothers and sisters. One Florida family honors the communion of saints in a small, special way. A company owned by the Clinker family created the popular Tiny Saints charms. Catherine Szeltner spoke with the force behind these saintly products.
Joe Clinker is the founder of Tiny Saints. He joins us now. Joe, tell us the story behind your company.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. So we started in 2013, but really our story started a bit before that. In October of 2011, our third child, Melody, was stillborn. And at that time we had two children who had a lot of questions after that, and obviously so did my wife and I. But what we really found was that the kids had questions about where their baby sister was, and really one key question they had was, who is she with? And so we started talking to them about the saints and about heaven, and went online, of course, to do that, and they looking at pictures. But a lot of the pictures of these saints weren't really children-friendly. And we started to develop these designs and eventually realized that maybe we could touch a few more people with these kind of cute new characters and new take on the saints.
They really are precious, and they've taken off quite a bit. What kind of response have you received since launching? It's
really been exciting. At this point, we've sold over 250,000 Tiny Saints, and that's to places all over the world. In fact, my wife, who's kind of the heartbeat of the company right now, she runs everything, told me that in the past 10 days she's shipped to 5 different countries. But also what's really been inspiring is the number of parishes and ministries and schools and youth groups who are buying them in bulk.
And Joe, the church is blessed with so many saints. How often are you adding to the Tiny Saints collection?
Adding new saints is a big deal to us because as much as this is a cute product and it's kind of a universally appealing product, this is more to us about sharing the stories of the saints and letting people realize that we're not alone and that we have this real, alive presence in the communion of the saints. We started off with 20, now we're at a little over 80, and that's just in the past 2 years.
That's incredible, and you can find more at shoptinysaints.com. Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Up next, Florida Senator Marco Rubio counters criticism from GOP rival Donald Trump about his personal finances. And these nuns storm heaven with their prayers day and night. The Christian includes he does not close the door to anyone, even if this provokes resistance. He who excludes because he believes himself to be better generates conflicts and divisions. A poignant message of Pope Francis during Thursday morning's Mass at the Vatican's Casa Santa Marta residence, where Francis lives. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick. Florida Senator Marco Rubio dismisses criticism from GOP rival Donald Trump, who says Rubio is, quote, a disaster with his credit cards.
I find it ironic that the only person running for president that's ever declared a bankruptcy 4 times in the last 25 years is attacking anyone on finances.
Rubio says he'll release all statements detailing his use of a credit card he shared with the Republican Party of Florida before his election to the U.S. Senate. He insists he paid for any personal expenses originally charged to that card.
Donald Trump is running for president because politicians are all talk and no action.
Meanwhile, Trump starts airing his first campaign radio ads today in 3 early voting states. Voters in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina will hear the spots through the end of the month. Trump, whose poll numbers recently slipped from the top of the GOP field, is plunking out $300,000 to run the ads on NBC's Today Show. He says this shouldn't be seen as an indication that he is feeling heat. We have Jason Russell, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. We all know Trump has deep pockets. Is he digging in for the long haul here with these ads?
Well, there's no reason to think that he's not digging in for the long haul. He has great poll numbers. He has a lot of money, clearly, we all know that. And so there's no reason to think that he's not doing that. These ads really show that he's willing to try to reach out and find voters in new ways. And so there's no reason to think he's not in this for the very long haul.
Well, people know him pretty well. He's had a lot of publicity. What does he hope to accomplish with this ad campaign, do you think?
That's my question, because I listened to both of the ads, and they didn't seem very effective to me. They're pretty monotone. They're not very exciting. For something involving Donald Trump, they're actually pretty boring. So, you know, it shows he's in this for the long haul, but I'm not sure how effective these ads are going to be at reaching voters.
So what about the Rubio finances, the credit card thing? Do Republican voters care about that?
No, and I don't think they're ever going to. You know, Marco Rubio has a plus 43 favorability rating with Republicans, which is astounding. I actually see a lot of parallels between this issue and Hillary Clinton's email scandal, because both candidates have very high favorability ratings within their own parties, and they frankly don't care about these issues. They have very respectable opinions of these people. They don't think that they're fallible, so they give each of these candidates the benefit of the doubt.
What about the new slogan that Jeb Bush has come out? Is that effective? Jeb can fix it, is it?
I question that as well.
Fix what?
That's the question. Some people have, said, are you trying to fix the election? Are you trying to fix your country? Are you trying to fix your campaign? So it raises a lot of questions. But either way, I still think that Jeb Bush is in this for the long haul. Of all the candidates, I still think he has some of the best endorsements in this race. When you combine his campaign and his super PAC, he certainly has the most money in this race. So even though he's got some negative press right now and he's got some not so great poll numbers right now, he's not worried about that. He's worried about what his poll numbers are going to look like a week outside of Iowa.
Interesting timing, though. His dad's got a new book out. In it, he's criticizing Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld during his son George W.'s campaign. Any surprises there? It's
surprising where you were seeing this criticism come from, because you wouldn't expect a former president to say the words that he was saying. I won't use the same language that he used because it was a little inappropriate. But, he definitely just came out and said that Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney were being hardline, and that they took too much of an intense approach, and that Dick Cheney was trying to use too much power as the vice president in the White House.
He said he had his own empire there.
Yeah.
Interesting politics. We appreciate you being with us, Jason. Thank you for joining us from the Examiner.
Thank you.
And finally tonight, the power of prayer. The Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration have kept a tradition going since 1878. The nuns have been praying nonstop for the sick and troubled. They respond to calls, letters, and emails with prayer requests from all over the world. Donna Bendon is about to begin her shift.
I don't know why I picked Wednesday, but I picked that time because I can pray from 7 to 8, and then I can go to work at 8.
Every week she helps strangers by praying for them.
Sometimes it's overwhelming with the pain that people have and the illnesses that they're suffering.
Since 1878, the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration in La Crosse, Wisconsin, have been opening their hearts and praying for the sick, the troubled, and stressed out, nonstop, day and night.
So every day I receive the intentions that we receive from all over the world by phone and by email and by paper slips, and I respond to them. I got this one prayer that was, pray for me in apartment 8, building B, because our sewage has overflowed and there's water everywhere.
Sister Hennessy summarizes the prayer requests every day, putting them into a folder in the Adoration Chapel where at least 2 people are praying at all times. Someone recently requested prayers for elementary school principal Laura Huber.
10 months ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. The prayer sustained me in ways that I haven't been able to articulate at this point in time.
About 18 years ago, the number of nuns started dwindling, so they asked the community to help out in the 1-hour shifts.
I think Wednesday is the best day of my week every day, every time, because I start with that peace.
And if someone doesn't show up for their shift?
If it's 11 o'clock at night and it's my hour and another sister doesn't show up, I can't just go to bed. You're like, it's 137 years.
Spreading love to strangers, one prayer at a time.
Furnace of divine love, grant peace to the world.
Oh, how we need our prayer warriors, and we're so grateful for them for another 137 years. Until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. You can watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night. May God bless you.